Have you ever been underestimated just because you're small or slow? Let me tell you about the time yes, a tortoise outsmarted the fiercest predator in the jungle, the greedy leopard. Trust me, you'll want to hear how it ends. Setting the stage, life in the jungle, they call me Mzee Kobe Old Tortoise. My shell may be cracked in a few places, and my legs not as quick as they once were, but my mind is as sharp as the thorn of the acacia tree. I have lived in the heart of the great jungle for many seasons, more than I can count. And in all that time, I've seen the trees whisper secrets to the wind. Rivers carry stories down from the mountains, and the stars blink gently over our land like watchful elders. Ours is no ordinary jungle. This land breathes. It listens. It remembers each day. As the orange sun stretched its fingers across the horizon, I would rise from my cold burrow beneath the termite mound and shuffle my way through the dew-covered grass. The birds would sing songs of old. The monkeys would chatter about fresh fruit, and the elephants, gentle giants, would stroll past like silent kings of an ancient empire. Life here had a rhythm, a song, a pulse. We all had our part to play. You see, in our jungle, every animal knows its place. The lion may roar and rule, but even he does not hunt for pleasure. The elephant may be massive, but he does not crush the grass without cause. We respect the balance, the harmony that holds our world together like the weave of a well-wrapped kitten's cloth, but not everyone values such balance. Among us lived a leopard, a striking beast with golden fur and black rosettes that flickered like shadows under moonlight. His name was Oga. He was young, strong, and faster than the wind. But what set him apart was not his power, no. It was his greed. Oga believed that the jungle belonged to him. He saw no reason to share, no honor, and humility. He hunted not because he needed food, but because he could. He hoarded the choicest meat, frightened smaller creatures away from the watering hole, and took pleasure in reminding us all that he was the most feared predator of the land. We had all grown weary of him. The meerkats no longer played near the rocks. The bush babies stopped singing at night. Even the mighty buffalo gave Oga wide space whenever he prowled nearby. As for me, I kept to myself. I knew my speed or lack of it meant I couldn't outrun danger, but I had something far more valuable than quick legs: wisdom earned through age. One morning, while the mist still hung like a dream over the land, I decided to visit the big river. It was my favorite spot. The current there spoke in riddles, and the smooth stones along its banks remembered every tale told beneath the stars. I loved to sit there, let the water wash over my feet, and listen to the stories whispered by the earth itself. As I slowly made my way there, I noticed signs: broken branches, crushed grass, and the sharp tang of fresh blood in the air. The signs of a hunt, the signs of Oga. I paused, tucking myself halfway into my shell. Not out of fear, no. I have faced too many suns to be ruled by fear, but out of caution. Oga was nearby, and when he was near, trouble followed. That morning, the jungle felt different. The usual songs of birds were quieter, and the air held a kind of tension, like the drum skin before a village dance. Something was about to happen. I continued on, slower than before, listening. Watching by midday, I reached the river and found it empty, too empty. No gazelles, no crocodiles sunbathing, not even the tiny frogs that chirped from the reeds, just silence. That kind of silence that settles when a storm is preparing to strike. I should have turned back, but instead I stayed. I let the cool river lap at my feet, and I closed my eyes, thinking back to stories my grandfather told me. He too was a tortoise of great wit. He used to say, when the jungle forgets kindness, the wise must remind it. Not with teeth, but with thought. At that moment, I heard a rustle behind me. A soft pad of paws on moist earth. I didn't need to turn to know. It was Oga, and he was hunting only this time. He had chosen me as his prey. What does a wise tortoise do when death stares from the eyes of a leopard? Ah, that is a story worth telling. But I'm getting ahead of myself, Dot. This is how it all began. In a jungle full of life, music, and old stories, a greedy heart threatened to ruin the harmony. And it fell upon me, slow and steady, to show him that even the strongest predator cannot defeat wisdom. The leopard's greed, a threat emerges. There are many kinds of hunger in the jungle. There's the hunger of the belly, which makes the lion roar and the eagle swoop. There's the hunger of thirst, which drives even enemies to gather around. The same muddy watering hole. But then there's a different kind of hunger that doesn't fill the stomach but swells the ego. That kind is dangerous. That morning, Oga was filled with that kind of hunger. I could sense it as he stepped out from behind the tall bush willow tree. His eyes burned like two pieces of charcoal still glowing from last night's fire. His fur shimmered in the sunlight, and yet all I could see was the shadow he cast. His tail flicked once, then again, the way it always did before he pounced, but he didn't strike. Not yet. He stood there, sizing me up as if trying to decide whether I was worth his time. I stared back calmly, my wrinkled face unbothered, my legs firmly planted in the river's cool mud. You move slowly, old one, he finally said, his voice like silk over steel. How have you survived this long? I smiled. I listen more. Then I walk. That's how I've stayed alive. He chuckled, his sharp teeth flashing. You must be clever then? Or lucky. But even the clever grow slow, and the lucky run out of luck. He took a step closer. Today I'm in the mood for something different. Now, let me tell you something about leopards. They don't talk before they kill. They pounce. They drag. They eat. But Ogahi was different. He enjoyed the fear. The moment when the prey realized there was no escape, he fed off it. That's why he didn't strike yet. You know what I've been thinking? Kobe, he said as he sat on his haunches like a lazy prince. The jungle is too full, too crowded, too many mouths, too many rules. Why should the strong live by the same law as the weak? I didn't answer. I knew better than to argue with a beast. Lost in his own thoughts, he continued, I've hunted every animal here. Antelope, monkey, even jackals. But you're the only one I've never tasted. They say you're tough, that your shell is like stone, that your flesh is bitter. I chuckled lightly. They say a lot of things. Oga's eyes narrowed. I want to be remembered. I want the jungle to tremble when it hears my name. I want the stories told around the fire to begin with. There once was a leopard so bold, so clever, that even the ancient tortoise fell to his claws. Ah, I said softly. Now I understand you don't want a meal. You want a legacy. Oga rose slowly and began circling me, the way snakes do when sizing up a nest. Exactly. And you, Kobe, are my final proof. If I defeat the oldest, the wisest, no one will challenge me again. I will be more than feared. I will be legend. The river murmured behind me as if it too was listening. The wind passed through the reeds like a quiet gasp. The jungle, old and watchful, knew what was coming. I stayed still. That's the thing about being a tortoise. Stillness is not fear, it's strategy. We wait, we watch. We think, Oga, I said, you have the strength of 10 cheetahs and the teeth of a crocodile. But you lack one thing. His tail stopped swaying. And what's that? Patience, he hissed. I'm tired of patience. I've waited long enough. It's time the jungle bowed to me. Now, here's the part where many would have run sprinted. Into the bush, begged the gods, or frozen in terror. But I am no fool. I knew I had no speed, no claws, no chance of fighting. But I've lived longer than any beast in that jungle. And I had watched Oga for moons. His pattern, his pride, his weakness. So I said, if you want to be remembered, you must do more than kill me. You must defeat me in a test, a challenge. If you win, your legend will live forever. Oga laughed, throwing back his sleek head. A challenge? From you? What could a wrinkled rock possibly challenge me with? Wisdom, I said. Let us see if your hunger is greater than your cunning. Meet me here tomorrow at dawn. If you solve my riddle, I will surrender myself. If you fail... I paused, letting the silence say the rest. He stared at me, eyes narrowed. What kind of game are you playing, old one? No game. Just a test. After all, if you defeat me, you'll be known not only as the strongest, but also the smartest. Is that not the legacy you want? He was quiet. I could see the thoughts dancing behind his eyes. The leopard's pride battled the predator's instinct. He wanted to leap, to end it right there. But his ego, that enormous, swollen ego would not let him walk away from a challenge to his intellect. Tomorrow, he finally said, at dawn, one riddle. If I solve it, your shell is mine. And with that, he vanished into the jungle, the way only leopards can, like a ghost swallowed by leaves. As I watched the reeds settle and the wind carry away his scent, I knew this would be no easy task. Oga was greedy, yes, but not stupid. If I wanted to survive, the riddle would have to be clever enough to trap a predator not in a cage of vines, but in a maze of his own mind. So that night, beneath the silver moon, I returned to my burrow and began to think. I remembered old riddles my grandfather told me, stories of animals who used brains over brawn. And as the fireflies blinked like tiny spirits in the grass, I began to form the perfect test, one that only a truly wise beast could solve. But the question was ... was Oga wise enough? My clever plan, outsmarting the predator that night, as the jungle hushed itself to sleep and only the crickets dared to sing. I sat deep in my burrow thinking the leopard would return at dawn, not with hunger, but with ambition in his chest. He didn't want food. He wanted glory. And glory is a much harder thing to feed than a belly. It's bottomless. I knew I had only one chance to survive, and it would not be by running or hiding or fighting. No, if Oga was a fire, I would not douse him. I would let him burn himself out. So I set to crafting a trap, not of ropes or thorns, but of words. You see, when I was a much younger tortoise, I used to travel far beyond the jungle. I had met animals of every kind: sand lizards from the red deserts, clever parrots from the coastal villages, even a spider who claimed to have outwitted gods. It was during those journeys that I learned riddles with teeth. I needed a riddle that would tempt Oga's pride, that would seem simple, but twist in his mind like a snake in tall grass. Something he could not ignore. By midnight, the stars above whispered their approval. I had it. A riddle passed to me by a desert owl in the Donga Hills, one even I had taken a week to solve. The first time I heard it, it would be perfect. Now came the second part of my plan. I wasn't going to simply ask him the riddle and wait. No, I needed to raise the stakes. I needed Oga to believe that this challenge was greater than it was, that it was about more than just me. So I left my burrow and made my way to the oldest tree in the jungle, the grand baobab. This baobab is not like the others. It has seen centuries pass. Legends say it was once a giant that refused to bow to the gods. So it was turned into a tree and told to watch over the land forever. Its roots reach deeper than the oldest river, and its branches touch stars even owls dare not fly to. I scratched a message into its bark, one that I knew the birds would read at first light and carry through the treetops. At dawn, wisdom and strength will meet at the river's bend. Let the jungle watch and the future remember. That's the thing about messages in the jungle. Once the birds know, the wind knows. And once the wind knows, everyone does dot by the time I return to. The river, the first hints of dawn were stretching across the sky like warm honey on bark. I settled by the water's edge, my shell still damp from the morning dew, and waited. He came as expected. OGA. Smooth, silent, confident, but this time he wasn't alone. Hidden in the trees, behind vines and stones, were watchers. The monkeys, the mongoose, even the slow loris. They didn't dare come close, but they were watching. And Oga saw them. I had changed the rules. Now it wasn't just about eating me. Now it was a performance. He padded up slowly and sat across from me, just near enough to pounce. I see you sent invitations, he growled. I bowed my head. Great deeds deserve witnesses. You're not just hunting, Oga. You're chasing your legend. That pleased him. His whiskers twitched, and I could see the flicker of satisfaction in his eyes. I had him exactly where I wanted. Speak your riddle, he said. And so I did. I cleared my throat and spoke slowly, letting the words hang in the air like incense smoke. I am not alive, but I grow. I have no lungs, but I need air. I have no mouth, and yet I roar. What am I? Silence. The river gurgled softly. The monkeys leaned in closer. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Oga blinked. Then again. I've heard this before, he muttered, pacing slightly. It's a trick. No tricks, I replied calmly. You wanted a challenge. This is it. Solve it, and you win. His tail twitched. I am not alive, but I grow, he whispered. No lungs, but I need air. He sat, then stood, then paced again. I have no mouth, but I roar. He growled to himself, low and frustrated. This is nonsense. Everything that roars has a mouth. Not everything, I said. He bared his teeth. A waterfall roars, a lion roars, even thunder roars. But only one of those fits the riddle, I replied. And your time is running out. He spun. You never said there was a time limit. No wise beast wastes time debating the rules of a test. A truly wise one solves the puzzle, no matter how it's given. The onlookers murmured among themselves. Whispers rustled through the leaves. Oga could feel it, his reputation teetering. He sat again, breathing heavier now. A storm? No, not quite. He slammed a paw into the dirt. It's a river. No, I said gently. Then it's the wind. Wrong again. He stood, panting now, his fur bristling. Give me another. One. That one was old. Too many tricks. Give me a real challenge. I shook my head. One riddle. That was the deal. Fail to solve it, and the jungle remember. And in that moment, he knew. Not just that he had lost, but that others had seen. Him lose. His legend, the one he chased so desperately, was slipping through his claws like dry sand. He lunged toward me, but stopped just short. My shell glinted in the rising sun, my face unmoved. I didn't flinch because I knew he couldn't attack now. Not with the jungle watching. Not with his failure echoing across the treetops. He growled once low, guttural, and then turned, vanishing back into the trees without another word. As he disappeared into the brush. I turned to the watchers and said clearly, the answer, dear friends, is fire. The big test. When brains battle brawn, the jungle did not sleep after that morning. By noon, the story of the riddle had flown farther than even the hawks could reach. It was told in whispers by streams, cackled over fires, and hummed in lullabies by mothers to their curious young. The leopard, the mighty Oga, had been beaten not by fang or claw, but by the slow, steady mind of an old tortoise. Me, I should have felt proud. Triumphant, even. But the truth was, I knew better than to celebrate too early. Leopards do not forget. And wounded pride can be more dangerous than sharpened teeth. That very night, the jungle grew still again, not with peace, but with suspense. The hyenas did not laugh, and even the noisy frogs fell silent. Something dark moved through the underbrush, something bitter. I remained inside my burrow, listening to the distant rustle of leaves and the occasional snap of a twig. I knew it was him. Oga had returned, not to answer riddles, not to play mind games. He had come back in the purest, oldest form of confrontation, to take by force what he could not win with wit. By dawn, I emerged to find fresh claw marks on the trail near my burrow, deep gouges in the earth, signs of fury. He hadn't pounced yet, but he was near, watching, waiting. And so I prepared for the final test, not one of riddles, but of resolve. There's an old saying among my kind: when your strength is not in your legs and your power not in your shell, then let your courage carry you where fear dares not tread. I set out to the open clearing beneath the grand baobab, the place where he had failed the riddle. But this time I did not arrive alone. Word had spread. Creatures large and small gathered, not to witness a trick or riddle, but to witness a moment of truth. For the jungle had realized something important. If Oga could not rule by wisdom, he would try by fear. And if I fell, there would be no stopping him. The birds perched in a wide circle in the trees. The gazelles stood in the distance. Even the usually aloof lions watched from the shadow of the rocks, their tails twitching slowly. And then he arrived. Oga. His coat no longer shimmered with the same arrogance. His eyes burned brighter than before, but now with something colder vengeance. He stepped into the clearing, muscles taut beneath his golden fur, and stopped a mere tail's length from me. You tricked me, he growled. I challenged you, I replied. And you lost. His lips curled. You made me a fool. No, I said. Your pride did that. He lunged. Not a warning. Not a show. A real lunge. A burst of raw, angry muscle hurtling toward me. But I was ready. I tucked in, deep into my shell. I have done it 1,000 times, but never with the certainty that what lay outside might be my final moment. His claws raked across my back with a sound like stone grinding against steel. He roared, louder than I'd ever heard him. He circled, struck again, bit at my shell, shook me, but I held firm. The jungle watched, breathless, and then he did something unexpected. He stopped. He stepped back, panting, foam at the edges of his mouth. My shell had not cracked, not even a scratch deep enough to leave a mark. His strength had met the one thing it could not break, patience made solid. You think you've won again? He spat, circling me now. But hiding is not winning. You're nothing but a rock with legs. I slowly emerged, my face calm, eyes steady. And you're a storm with no purpose, I said. He flinched. You roar but bring no rain. You strike but earn no respect. You crave fear, but fear cannot rule forever. His eyes flashed. And what rules, old tortoise? Words, riddles, silence. I raised my head higher. Wisdom, harmony, memory. He looked around then, really looked for the first time. The eyes of the jungle stared back at him. Eyes that were no longer afraid. Not trembling, not submissive. Watching, judging. And then something happened I did not expect. He looked. Tired. Oga, who had once leapt from tree to tree like lightning, given form now, sagged slightly in his shoulders. His breathing slowed. The fight in him didn't disappear, but it faded. I only wanted them to remember me, he said quietly. I stepped forward, and they will. But what they remember, that is your choice. There was a silence deeper than the one before, a silence filled with thought. He stared at me for a long time, and then he turned. He walked not with the slinking rage of a predator, but with the slow steps of something learning, perhaps for the first time, what it meant to listen. He vanished. Into the trees. No roar. No threat. Just the rustle of leaves behind him, The creatures gathered in the clearing did not cheer. They did not dance. But their silence was filled with something else respect. The jungle had changed that day. Not with violence, not with death, but with restraint. With endurance, they approached me slowly, young monkeys bowing, birds chirping, old songs, even the jackals nodding in their cautious way. I had not just survived, I had reminded them that strength isn't always loud, that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just waits ... and stands ... and endure. The final lesson, why wisdom always wins many seasons, have passed since the morning I stood in the clearing beneath the grand baobab, staring into the furious eyes of a leopard whose pride had begun to wither. The jungle has changed. Oh, not in the way the rivers run or the way the rains fall. No, those things remain the same. But something deeper shifted. A truth took root that day, like a buried seed finding sun after a long sleep, and it all began with a choice, not his. Mine, you see. I could have fought with words. I could have sharpened my tongue into spears and tried to pierce Oga's ego again and again. I could have mocked him, humiliated him, and forced him into exile with public shame. But wisdom doesn't humiliate. It humbles. The truth is, I didn't want to defeat Oga. I wanted him to see himself, to see what he had become. Because sometimes when you hold up a mirror long enough, even the wildest beast will stop and wonder what is staring back at them. That was the real test. It wasn't the riddle. It wasn't the claws on my shell. It was the moment after the moment when his strength failed him, and he stood before the watching jungle with nothing left but his thoughts. And in that quiet, he changed. I've seen him since then, not often. He doesn't prowl the way he used to. He keeps to the far hills now, where the trees grow thin and the prey run faster. He no longer roars just to hear himself echo. He watches. He listens. They say he hasn't hunted unnecessarily in many moons. They say a family of warthogs even drinks near him without fear. He may never be a hero, but he is no longer a tyrant. And that is enough. As for me, I remained where I always had, close to the earth, slow and steady, moving with purpose. But something else grew around me after that day. Respect. Animals began to seek me out, not just for protection, but for guidance. The young ones came with questions. The older ones came with regrets, and the storytellers came with fire in their eyes. They wanted to know how. How did the tortoise stop the leopard? They expected a secret spell, a hidden trap, some kind of trick. But I told them what I will tell you now. Wisdom is not a weapon, it is a mirror. It does not cut flesh. It reveals it. When I was young, I believed that wisdom was knowing more than others, that it meant having all the answers. But age, that patient teacher, showed me something else. Wisdom is knowing which questions to ask and when to wait in silence for the answers. That was the lesson Oga taught me. Yes, him. Because the truth is, he forced me to become something I had not yet dared to be. He made me step out of my shell, not just in body, but in spirit. He tested the limits of my patience, my cleverness, my courage. And by doing so, he reminded me that even the wise must be willing to act when the moment demands it. The jungle does not only need silence. Sometimes it needs a voice. One day, a small squirrel came to me. She was no bigger than my eye, but her questions were vast. "Zikobi," she asked, "why did the leopard stop attacking you that day? Was it the riddle?" I looked at her and smiled gently. "No, little one, it wasn't the riddle. It was the fact that I did not fear him." Her eyes widened. "But weren't you afraid?" I nodded. "Of course. But fear is not something you must surrender to. You carry it with you like a stone in your shell. It reminds you to be careful, but not to be silent. The moment you stop thinking because you're afraid, you've already lost." She blinked, chewing on a bit of bark thoughtfully. Then she asked, "So does that mean the strongest always lose?" I chuckled. "Not at all. Strength is a gift. But without wisdom, it becomes a curse. Like a river with no banks, strength without wisdom floods everything. Drowns the very jungle it was meant to protect." She smiled at that and scampered off, her tiny tail flicking in the morning sun. And I knew, as I watched her disappear into the tall grass, that the stories would go on. They still speak of that day. You know, they call it the day the shell outshone the claw. A bit dramatic, perhaps, but stories have a way of stretching like vines climbing toward the sky, curling in ways even the teller can't predict. But the heart of the story remains that when strength met patience, and speed met stillness, and fury met thought, it was wisdom that walked away standing. So now, as I sit beneath the old baobab, letting its shade cool my shell, I do what my elders once did. I tell stories. I remind the young ones that victory is not always about the loudest roar or the fastest strike. Sometimes it's about staying quiet, watching, thinking, waiting, because wisdom, like a tortoise, moves slowly, but it always reaches its destination.